All right, welcome back, everybody. Thirsty Thursday, number five. Tonight we have on tap Assistant Chief Rob Frampton from the Salisbury Fire Department in Maryland, talking kitchen fires. We're going to do something a little different tonight. It's going to be more of where we're seeing kitchen fires, community outreach and stuff like that the departments are doing, reaching out afterwards and trying to prevent them in future fires. And then we're going to wrap it up with a little bit of tactics. So hang in there. There's going to be good stuff all the way through. We can promise you that. Now kick it over to Chief. Excuse me. Too much Corona already. Kick it over to Chief Steedman for him to take over from there.
Great. Thank you, Ben. We definitely want to welcome everybody tonight, especially Chief Frampton from Salisbury Fire Department. I've had the pleasure of knowing Rob for a long time and being able to work with him for a while. And as part of what he's going to talk about later on tonight is some of the importance, not only about the strategy and tactics behind kitchen fires, but also a lot of the other part that we usually don't talk about, some of the pre-planning, some of the community risk reduction portions of this that we usually don't get too much into in the fire service. But hopefully by the end of this, everyone will see really the research that he's done, why it's so important, and have maybe look at this through a little bit different lens. So with that, again, welcome everybody. I'm Trevor Steedman. I used to work with actually all three of these other miscreants on the screen here with you back up in Maryland, and I'm now down here in South Florida and just enjoying life right now. So appreciate you all being with us, and I'll pitch it over to Bobby McGee.
Hey, everybody. Welcome, Chief Frampton. I appreciate it. I guess, Ben, on our side of the table here, we got to ask if we got on Chief all night or if we can just talk to those guys as Rob and Trevor. We'll check with them here in a little bit about that.
That's a good question.
First and foremost, we're thinking about everybody. Things are starting to open up and things are starting to happen around the country. So a little cheers to my old employer. About 20 years ago, I left Sussex County EMS, and they're having a heck of a bad time with some of the coronavirus stuff and the big spike here in the county. So I wish them all the best to stay safe and take care of everybody. And I'm really excited to hear the conversation. Everyone knows I'm kind of a research kind of guy. So some of the stuff that Rob put out was really, really interesting stuff that kind of opened my eyes a little bit to kitchen fires. So let me give it over to Rob and let's hear your intro, brother.
All right. Thank you guys for inviting me tonight. Like they said, my name is Rob Frampton. I'm Assistant Fire Chief with the Salisbury Fire Department. Used to work with Trevor and Bobby down at the beach when I was first getting started back in 99 and 2000, and kind of have made my home with Salisbury. Started out as a volunteer and progressed up through the ranks, and currently am assigned as the Assistant Chief on A shift. And I got a good group of guys and gals underneath of me, and they've allowed me and supported me in doing some of this research. So looking forward to see where tonight's conversation leads us. And like Trevor said, kind of hit on the importance of the studies and the research and the science behind some of this with regards to taking that into some of the operations and tactics. So ready to get going. So thank you, guys.
Awesome. As we kick this off, as always, as you guys are watching, feel free to reach out, send us questions, either through Facebook Live or YouTube. There's a little bit of a delay, so as soon as we see them pop up here, and then there's a little bit of a pause in the conversation, we'll try and throw that question out. And like we've done before, there's really nothing off topic or nothing that we're not going to throw out there to discuss. So please, like I said, if you guys have something, shoot it to us and let us know, and we'd be more than happy to talk about it. So here we go. I think we're going to start off with Bobby tonight, talking a little bit about, I'm going to let Bobby take over and do his thing.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I like to follow research a lot. Everything from the late 80s when Fairfax County did a big research study on smoothbore nozzles to the high-rise studies that happened with the IAFF and the NFPA and that group, all the way up until the ventilation impact studies and things like that. So I've always followed them with a keen sense when it comes to firefighting. And it's funny when we talked about doing this program and seeing some of the information from Rob, I kind of could see how this really kind of can dovetail into our tactics when attacking kitchen fires. I know just yesterday, Wichita had a grab with a working kitchen fire, and Rob's going to talk, I'm sure, a whole lot more about the numbers and the amount of loss and stuff like that. But I found it all, very, very interesting. And, I think, if we look at it, my perspective is we talked a lot about ventilation. The ventilation impact studies talked about 2 openings is really, really bad, an inlet and an outlet. And so what we started doing in the fire service was kind of starting to try to control doors, which is what we were telling civilians to do all along. And so really all that stuff kind of tied together. And, now we're doing the same thing. We're controlling the fires by closing the doors, and victims are surviving because they're closing the doors. So a lot of times the studies actually affect us in the firefighting side of things too. So I'm really excited to have Rob here, and hope to hear a lot more about what he found out.
Yeah, so I'll throw out a little bit of it, just so we've got some talking points here. I think the thing to remember about kitchen fires, a lot of time I think we overlook them just because they tend to be relatively small in nature. A lot of times it's confined to the container or the stove or the room of origin, and I think some of the data shows that I believe it was 84% of all cooking fires are held to the room of origin or less. The thing that I think is staggering, though, is that overwhelmingly in the nation, the average is 50% of most fire departments' total property losses because of cooking fires. So in addition to that, they tend to only be about 2% of our calls. So a lot of stuff there. There's a ton of information out there on it through, USFA and IFC, IAFF, those kind of things that are out there. But just to kind of get us going, specifically with regards to Salisbury, in Salisbury, it was 57.6% of our total property loss in 2018. So total property loss for the department that year from fires was $2.2 million, and roughly 1.28 was from cooking fires or attributed to cooking fires. So that's pretty significant, especially when you're looking at it at being only about 2% of our total call volume.
Rob, I think one of the things that we talked about was, as we were getting ready for this, the locations and the places that we're seeing these kitchen fires occur. And I know we had the conversation, we all worked in the resort town of Ocean City versus areas that aren't so much in that, where you have more permanent residents with a different socioeconomic status. I think one of the things that we talked about or we mentioned were the rental units, and seeing the increase in fires there, and like I was alluding to initially, the permanent residents versus the transient and the vacation stuff, and the different types of fires that we're seeing as far as kitchens go there. So if you want to touch on that briefly?
Sure. So I don't know how many of the people listening are familiar with Salisbury's makeup, but it's a lot of rental property. There's over 8,000 registered rental units in Salisbury's, in the city of Salisbury. Actually, they don't have to be registered if they're in the county, but our population density is about 6,050 per square mile, and our household median income is $28,500, which is below the state average by about 30%. With all those rentals, the low socioeconomic numbers of people that are living there, they're lesser educated, and it's a proven fact and that's out there that these people, renters, tend to not care as much about the house, the equipment, the stove. They may be afraid to report something that's broken or malfunction because they're afraid of getting evicted, or causing anybody to have to come into their house. So it's definitely there's all kinds of research out there talking about the difference between owner-occupied structures and rental structures and socioeconomic class. So kind of goes without saying, Salisbury has a lower socioeconomic class than, say, Ocean City, which we're familiar with. So we're going to run more residential kitchen fires. Now, with that being said, we were talking the other night, Ocean City is probably going to run more commercial kitchen fires in the course of a year, just because they have more commercial kitchens than Salisbury does. Those tend to be controlled with hood systems and things like that. But the people in Salisbury, we don't have any of those, type of offerings here. So definitely the big key indicator for that is socioeconomic levels as to why I think Salisbury experiences the amount of kitchen fires that we do.
Trevor, how about you guys down in Palm Beach Shores? Is it similar to Ocean City? What's the, if you had just off the top of your head, what would you say that you guys see more of?
It's a little hybrid of both, actually. And it was interesting in speaking last night offline with Rob, is I assumed that Salisbury, in addition to what he's talking about with the prevalence of kitchen fires, because they're such a large university town or have a large university in their first due, that either on campus and off campus housing would account for a lot of those. And it was really surprising when he told me those statistics just weren't there, as compared to some of the other places. Some of the differences are we don't have quite the same socioeconomic makeup that Rob does in Salisbury or that we have in Ocean City. We have a much older community per capita. And by and large, we have a very at-risk community, especially now with the COVID going on. So our biggest push is really with what we can do in the inspected properties, because the majority of our first due is residential. We do have commercial properties, and they're very well inspected, very well maintained, and we're fortunate in that respect. But the private dwellings typically are not inspected properties for rentals, even if they have a rental license that gets our foot in the door to do inspections. But typically anything that's 6 or more units would be considered an inspected property. And therefore, it has a regular inspections, fire extinguishers are required. And we'll see later on with some of the things we discussed, some of the fire suppression devices that are available out there for these multiple residential units. So to that end, what we've done for community risk reduction, since most of our kitchen fires are really going to be in private dwellings that we don't have the opportunity to go in and inspect, we take care of it twofold. We do a fire extinguisher inspection, maintenance, and selection process for private residences, where we work with people in the community, and our firefighters work side by side to do fire extinguisher training with these people. Because you know how it is, somebody buys a fire extinguisher and it sits in their broom closet for 15 years, and then when they need it, it's useless. So we go through that process. We actually go through a hands-on extinguisher training with them. And then the second thing is we do some residential or community risk reduction with residential risk reduction, where we'll go out and do a courtesy home fire inspection. So we'll look for anything that might not make that home fire safe, doing the fire prevention, any housekeeping issues, and make recommendations. Then it also goes into some other areas like slips, trips, and falls, again, just because we have an at-risk community. So the majority of ours, what we see, and there's where I think some of the similarities come in, is a lot of it's housekeeping issues. We have a good mix of your own properties and rented properties, but we see a lot of people who have unattended cooking. They'll put pizza boxes in the ovens, and somebody else who might not be a permanent resident in that house, a grandparent, might come in to cook something, bake something, and then winds up catching the pizza boxes on fire. And I just remember back to the Ocean City days, the first trap person that I went to in a structure was actually a kitchen fire in a high rise, and the person was sound asleep in bed and their kitchen's off. So I think we see more of that. An interesting side note to some of the things is because of the climate here, we have a lot of outdoor kitchens. So what's kind of weird for us is we'll get a call sometimes for a kitchen fire, and we're not sure whether it's inside or outside the structure, where normally we'd look at maybe a barbecue grill or something outside. there's a lot of large outdoor kitchens. So when a caller calls in and says, my kitchen's on fire, we might not know whether that's inside or outside, but either way, we know it's towards the rear of the structure. So from a tactical standpoint, at least that's a consistency that we do have.
Sorry, I forgot where my button was to unmute my mic. We've only been doing this for five times now. I'll figure it out eventually. Yeah, that's a great thing, and I think that's something that we're going to get into later that you mentioned there at the end was the location of the kitchen. When we get into the tactics and talking about that and knowing your buildings, knowing your layouts, all that kind of stuff is knowing that the kitchen fire is typically in the back and, making your line selection, making your approach, making all that kind of stuff, or your stretch, all that kind of stuff based off of knowing all of that stuff. I know in talking with Rob earlier in the week, we discussed, it's a night, automatic extinguishment systems that some places might have. Obviously, in the commercial kitchens, we're going to see a lot of those because they're going to be required. But there are some places, and I know in Salisbury, Rob mentioned earlier that we have a set of apartments that have systems in them. And our fire marshal's office strongly recommends that as they're in the process of construction and all that, of adding them in. And I think, Rob, you guys actually had a fire in one last 2 months or so. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So what Ben's referring to is a large. It's two buildings. They are joined through a common hallway on the first floor. It's sprinklered and all that kind of stuff. It's mainly a lower income, older clientele. I'm not sure if there's an actual age requirement to live there or not. But they went ahead and they had the I don't know the exact name if they're using the fire stop canisters or not, but they went ahead and installed them above each stove in the occupants' rooms. Then they can obviously cook. It's a full apartment in each one. It's 3 or 4 story building. I can't remember, 3, I think. And we actually got a call for an odor investigation and went there and just like many of us are on all the time, the occupant left food on the stove, left the apartment, and she had actually left with her son, and it ignited the fire stop canister, and the canister came down, and it did its job. However, the fire got, I think, a little bit ahead of it. It actually did kick one of the sprinklers as well, but the fire stop did what it was supposed to do. I just think whatever she had left on there kind of advanced a little much. So we did have a little bit of water damage. Thankfully, we got there and were able to get that shut off. But the fire stops are definitely something in multifamily dwellings, regardless of any sort of age requirement, that strongly need to be recommended. I think some of the stats that I found were I think there's only like 8% in the U.S. of multifamily residential dwellings that require those fire stop style canisters or some sort of AES system. So kind of getting back to, I think Trevor was talking about it, just one little point to throw some more numbers at you. And we talked about this the other night, was unattended equipment is overwhelmingly the leading factor for kitchen fires. I was able to dig up some numbers, and 40% of the kitchen fires are because of unattended equipment. So almost half are that. The others would be mechanical deficiency, misuse of a material product, so too much grease in the pan, those kind of things. And then just to piggyback on the low socioeconomic portion of it, those people tend to eat less healthy, so they tend to use more grease and fats, and studies show that. That's not just an assumption or stereotyping. That's studies done that have shown that those people are cooking with more flammable liquids than say a higher socioeconomic class would. So that was about the fire that we had up there. Bobby mentioned the fire that I think it was Wichita had. And just we'll get into the strategy and tactics a little bit later, and I think that's when it's probably appropriate to talk about the fire that we were talking about the other night, where the guys had a grab. I think it's probably a better time to talk about it. So.
And real quick, Rob, before we get into that, I just want to talk about some of the unusual kitchen fires that we have also. I know in Salisbury, you all have a lot, especially up along, trying to remember, like Camden Avenue and some of those areas. You have a lot of the large 2.5-story, 3-story wood frame balloon construction Victorians that have been converted into apartments and boarding houses. So a lot of times where you normally think the kitchen would be in the structure, there might be makeshift kitchens, or there might be a common kitchen serving several living units. And I know we had this several years ago in Ocean City. And Bobby, you might have to remind me where it was. It's like it was up on 121st Street on the Ocean Block. But because we have so many J1 visa students to come over and work in the summer season up there, they had taken a section of storage in a parking garage and actually built cubicles in there for living, had run an extension cord as fixed wiring over just with drop down lights. And each one of those units had a mattress and a hot plate in it. So we would go there for odorous smoke or a smoke detector activation at 0 dark 30 in the morning in a parking garage, thinking, okay, this is going to be your typical smells and bells, malfunction, weather related, whatever the case is. And you automatically step off the rig and you smell food on the stove, and it's a head scratcher because you shouldn't have food on the stove in a parking garage, but their pot of ramen noodles had boiled dry in the little cubicles. So that's something we can talk about here in a little bit too, is the typical versus the atypical calls that we might run. And especially we might start having this again in 2008 when we started to have the economic downturn, just like we're having some issues now. We had some people who were actually living in their businesses. We went to a hair salon, again, 0 dark 30 call for what turned out to be a cooking fire in the back of a hair salon, which you wouldn't expect that to be occupied at that time of day. So it's kind of expecting the unexpected, even with these kitchen fires. And we don't keep stats on those atypical ones normally because they are so far outside the box. But Rob, could you talk about some of the maybe those larger structures that you go to, especially those Victorians, the boarding houses? We have in the form more so of the Airbnbs and the VRBOs. But in your case up there in Salisbury, how does that change your tactics when you get to the scene?
Sure. So Trevor's absolutely right. We have several large homes along the Camden Avenue area going to down towards the college, along with the Church Street area. It's funny you bring this up because I was talking to the guys. I can't remember the nature of the call. They went last shift just on Monday, and they went to one of the larger 3-story homes on Church Street, and it had been divided up into exactly what you're talking about. Common kitchen area on the first floor, common kitchen area on the second floor, and it was 9 single-room apartments, 9 separate apartments sharing a first-floor kitchen area and a second-floor kitchen area. So, again, that's where one of those – they come in and they go to cook their dinner, and they might run back to their room or get sidetracked on a phone or whatever. And the next thing you know, instead of that fire necessarily being in the room of origin, it's extended out into a common hallway area. And, you've got 4 or 5 different units on one floor. So you definitely have to be aware of it. I mean, the things that we look for are some of the things that a lot of us look at for other reasons, but counting number of gas meters, counting a number of electric meters, those kind of things, especially from a command officer standpoint and that first company officer arriving standpoint, is doing your scene size up and checking and seeing what you've got. When you go on the medical assists and the EMS calls, taking time to look around and looking at those buildings and have the ones that stick out. We're fortunate. Yes, we have them in our district, but there's not so many of them that we can't commit them to memory to at least know, hey, we're going to, the 825 East Church Street. That was that big house we went to 2 shifts ago where it was, there's 2 common areas. We're going there for, an odor investigation or something like that. So that's kind of a little bit is just paying attention to those things at all times, and figuring out. I tell my guys all the time, and Ben and I have talked about it. estimating hose line stretches, whether you go there for a medical assist. Hey, is this on the second floor? Is the 150 bumper line going to make it, or do I need to pull the 350 off the rear to get to the second floor to make my fire attack in this large house? So, those, Trevor hit the nail on the head. We've got them. They're all over. They share common bathrooms. They share common kitchens. And these guys and landlords are cutting these things up. It causes a forcible entry nightmare on a fire because they're all dead bolted 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 times. And these people, again, they're a lower socioeconomic class, and they go in there and they do their thing, and they smoke a little marijuana or do something a little heavier and pass out, fall asleep, and forget something on the stove, or their neighbor inadvertently forgets something on the stove, and then here we are at dark 30 and trying to figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to get into these places. So it's imperative that throughout any call we're going on to just keep those kind of things in mind and estimate, where you're going to put the engine, where you're going to put the truck, what hose lines I'm going to pull, and just how many people are living in those kind of buildings. So absolutely.
Cool. Thanks, Rob, for bringing that up. And Ben, if you don't mind, before we kick over to Bobby, would you mind showing the fire suppression system that Rob was talking about, the cans, if you have that video handy?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we've got a couple of videos of the automatic extinguishing equipment, so we'll throw those up right now. So here. So there was one. This next one's a little bit longer. Gives I think a little bit better idea of how it works, how you place it, and then again, like I said, how it works. So here's the second one. So those are a couple of examples, or that's one manufacturer of those automatic extinguishing systems. I'm sure there's more out there. That was just 2 good videos that we were able to find, or actually Trevor found them and sent them to us so we could show those off. Obviously not an endorsement for any particular brand or manufacturer, but if you guys have those, make sure you're checking with the manufacturer, make sure that you're putting them in correctly. And that if there's any service or anything that goes with them, that you're checking on that too. Do we want to get into talking some tactics, or did we want to talk the community risk reduction before we go there?
Well, I'll tell you what, man. Let's do a little bit of community risk reduction first, okay. And I think we can ease into the tactics as the finale for this. One thing I did want to say about those canisters. The nice thing about them is, as you saw in the promo videos from those different manufacturers, they are magnetic and they stick to the metal hood. The beauty behind them is they require 0 skill set whatsoever to operate, other than a cursory visual inspection, really, as far as their in-service date. It doesn't require pulling a pin or any sweeping, or you don't have to worry about plunging into a pot full of hot grease or anything else. So these really kind of transcend a lot of things, and especially with people who junk up their
their pantries and everything else. No one typically has a fire extinguisher, no matter how hard we try to educate, placed perfectly in their kitchen and readily accessible. It's usually in the back of a closet somewhere. It has spiders and webs and everything else that's in the nozzle. So most of these aren't even serviceable, and we have people all the time. They think they're going to do the Bruce Willis thing and like crack it over a railing and pitch it like a grenade. It's going to work if the squeezing doesn't happen. So not a good realistic thing. But from a community risk reduction standpoint, a lot of places do require these in multiple units, especially rental units, and where people at the end of the rental might take things with them and inadvertently or intentionally take the extinguishers, or again, they're just not serviceable. So it's really something to look into with the various manufacturers, like you said, Ben. And because it requires zero skill set to even operate, and especially you don't even have to be home and it'll work. Whereas an extinguisher, there has to be a human interaction to recognize the fire and also be able to deploy a fire extinguisher at that point. So from a community risk reduction standpoint, it's something that is good. And just to talk about that, I want to segue in and get your all's individual opinions on this. Typically, when we talk about fire prevention, your average firefighter, they understand the value of fire prevention, and a lot of them do it as a task that's assigned to them once a year. And in October, we're going to the schools, we're talking to the kids, we're doing stop, drop, and roll. But for your firefighters who are the go-getters, they're right out of the academy, they're trained, they might have a couple calls underneath their belt. They want to go, and they just don't see the prevention, or more so the community risk reduction. It's just not sexy. Let's be blunt about it. It's imperative. It's extremely important, but it's not like when you read something in the magazine about Ben Waples, he rescued the 9 blind children and their quadriplegic mother from searing heat and blinding smoke and without the protective cover of a hose line, blah 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 blah, versus Ben went and installed 26 smoke detectors in an at-risk neighborhood yesterday. Which one sounds sexier to you? But which one probably is, if not equal, which one probably had even a higher impact than that one family? You actually impacted 26 families with your program. So it's trying to get firefighters to look at things through a different lens, and it also builds that capital and that trust within the community. I know you guys in Salisbury do this frequently, or you have the programs where you do sweeps through different neighborhoods, or if there's a structure fire in a neighborhood, you canvass a certain radius around that to do education. And Bobby, I think you guys have some stuff not only in your career department, but also up in Delaware. I think you have some initiatives up there to make sure this happens. So it's really looking at, to Rob's point, having a rental community, which we have a lot of great renters too, but by and large, you typically don't see the same amount of emphasis put in a rental property from a renter that you do from a homeowner. So to that effect, if you have a person who can no longer be in their home, like in my case, because of maybe advanced age, somebody's a caretaker, or one spouse is a caretaker, one person breaks their hip, they might have to choose between staying in that home they've worked a lifetime to enjoy. And now all of a sudden they have to say, well, I might have to go into assisted living because I can't live here anymore because it's just not functional for me. And now that home that's been owned for 20, 30, 40 years now becomes a rental property. And you might not have the same upkeep, the same care typically. And that's, again, to Rob's point. So when we do some of those maybe what we call non-traditional fire service tasks, they really have a widespread impact. When we did our fire extinguisher training with our citizens, we did it with a property owners association group, and we put the pail full of partial diesel, part water out there, lit it off, and we let them side by side with one of our firefighters go in, and our firefighter talked them through the process. So now we have 50, 60 more people in the community who not only know how to select a fire extinguisher and maintain one, but they've actually used one, and now they have the confidence to do it. Was that something that our firefighters got to enjoy? Absolutely. Was it as exciting as going in and stretching line through the front door and knocking down the beast in the back bedroom? Maybe not, but the capital they built with our community and the trust that they built, and they know that and even our people in the community we're not the fire department, we are their fire department. And they say that, and that means a lot to us because, when it comes time where again, budgets come underneath scrutiny, the things that your backstep firefighters typically aren't going to concern themselves with, because they shouldn't. That's not their wheelhouse. But when it comes time, the people that we built that capital and trust with come to our aid and our defense just as much as we've come to theirs, and say, why would you want to mess with our firefighters? These are our firefighters, our paramedics. So that's kind of the lens I want some of our younger folks who are coming up, or people that might be aspiring to become officers, to start looking through that lens also. Albeit not as exciting, maybe for the most part, it's vitally important. So with that, Bobby, what are your thoughts from not only the career end but also the volunteering? So I know you serve a community that's both suburban and rural. So how does that work for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think our thrust has been more smoke detectors. So I was actually kind of interested in the kitchen fire thing because tactically kitchen fires are a little bit different. I was actually really impressed with that kitchen that they use that demo in. I mean, that's not like a kitchen that a lieutenant in Ocean City Fire Department have, more like a Palm Beach Shores Fire Chief's kitchen, but it was very nice for them to sacrifice really nice like that, But and the second thing I worry about those things is I think they're great and I probably should get them, but sometimes my wife uses the smoke detectors as when the dinner's done, and I'm just afraid it might screw my dinner up. So I need to really look at what temperatures they go off at. But
she can hear you, Bobby.
I hope no, she's inside. I think. I hope, but no, So smoke detectors definitely save lives. We talked about this the other night. We were talking about this discussion. One of the problems with a kitchen fire is most of the time we know what happens. They forget they left the pot on and they go to bed, or they get drunk and pass out, or whatever happens, but it's unintended cooking. And that's a majority of what we go to. So if they don't have working smoke detectors, they're not going to know. And the advancement of a kitchen fire is so fast. Most of us remember Dave Dotson stuff about reading smoke and talking about the box. Well, not only reading smoke, but, a kitchen is almost always in a larger area of your house. So it has more air supply. It shows less smoke outside because a box is large and absorbs more of it. So the fire department could show up and not think it's a really big deal. Pop that door open, give it a little extra air, and kind of have things going on. So, it really made me think a lot more about, kitchen fires in general. Residential sprinklers are really kind of a home run because, kitchens, one of the tendencies of kitchens is because they're hot and they have, we're cooking in there all the time, is we tend to not have smoke detectors in there. So we also actually give, kitchens a head start in fire detection because we're not putting heat detectors in residential structures for the most part. They're required in commercial, things like that. So, one of the things, Trevor, you were talking about earlier was talking about the unusual kitchens. And, we have like almost like dorm facilities. And Ocean City is a very resort town. We go all the way up to, anywhere from 20,000, 15,000 people in the wintertime on a weekend to 400,000 people in the summertime. So that's kind of our dynamics. And they bring in a lot of foreign students and things like that. And so what we have is a lot of the community kitchens that Rob was talking about earlier, where you have a kitchen in the middle and then you have units all the way around it and common hallways and things like that. And I think, Trevor, you touched on it a little bit. We also have a problem with them subdividing attics and wherever they can find in houses and structures in Ocean City. So, a kitchen fire that could risk a family of 4 for us very well could, put at risk 16 or 20 foreign students. So, that's something kind of a little bit, different for us in the whole perspective. But it's nice to see those, some different things, some different technologies coming out to make it not so cost prohibitive as, like, say, maybe a sprinkler system in an existing house, but to have something like that. So, that's kind of my spin on it. Is I think when we start going into the tactics about structural firefighting in the kitchens, I really want people to understand that you can really, in those areas of the house, the larger areas, especially the way we try to open these houses up, the newer constructions, very wide open areas, you can have a significantly advanced fire and have nothing showing. And typically those are going to be starting from those kitchen areas. So this all kind of goes together with our size up, our first in engine, our first in officer, to kind of see those things. So I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for, Trevor, but I mean, that's kind of my spin on this thing is I think it's really important for us to pay more attention to the difference with fire starting in kitchens. We do have a lot of commercial stuff in Ocean City, but that's like a topic for another day, I think.
Yeah, and Bobby, that's exactly what I was getting at. And also kind of dovetailing into that is that all kitchens aren't kitchens. And what I mean by that, look how much of a utility area that can be in the house, where, especially now, where kitchens are also classrooms and offices. So you can kind of expect a little bit of the unexpected in there. I know some years ago we had a house fire out in West Ocean City, and the people were, what's the way I can put this? They were nocturnal pharmaceutical salesmen in their spare time. And so the kitchen wasn't just for making chicken and dumplings on the weekends. It was, they were cooking their product in there. And when the hose crew or the attack crew went in and started doing the attack, they had a ton of used hypodermic needles on the table that had gotten knocked off the kitchen table from the hose stream onto the floor. Now we're crawling on top of it. So, you kind of get to know your areas, your neighborhoods, but this was a typical private dwelling. There's nothing from the exterior that you would have stereotyped this in any way, shape, or form. You just never know. To that end, also looking from a tactical standpoint, and I'll have you guys talk about the kitchen locations. One of the things I look at, and this is looking at it from a couple different angles, is when you're typically going into a kitchen, it's a utility area of the house. So unless you're an Ocean City fire lieutenant who can afford this high grade carpet in their kitchen, most of us don't have carpeted kitchens, so they're either tile or linoleum. So, and plus with the grease, the cooking oils, or everything else, sometimes it gets really, really slick in there. So trying to advance a hose line, you're having to use alternate techniques like using door frames or using corners of the house, sometimes to even advance the line, because if there's any water on the floor, it gets pretty slick. Think about that also when you have to rescue a victim or a downed firefighter. And we've trained to that effect where we've actually taken dishwashing liquid and put it all over the floor of the burn building to simulate that. You're like Bambi on the ice at that point, especially if you start spraying a hose line. So, from a tactical standpoint, you're not talking about the position of the kitchen within the structure. We'll get to that in a second. But look at some of the conditions that you're going to have on the way in, and some of the potential things that are going to slow you down, as well as just maybe hinder not only your advance, but also your egress or being able to get a downed firefighter or a victim out just because of the makeup of the floor. On the positive note of that, if you're disoriented, and Bobby talked about the open house plans, I'm looking at my kitchen right now. If I were to have a kitchen fire, it's going into this isn't good. Going into 3 rooms and has direct access up my stairwell. So even something that's confined or comes out as a kitchen fire is going to involve the majority of the downstairs in my house right now. So look at it from that standpoint. You even get disoriented. We talk about transitions in the house. Like we go from a carpeted area to a tile or linoleum area. We've gone from a living area probably to a utility area of the house. Especially the tiles that are on walls. Sometimes, not always, but a lot of times, the smaller tiles, you're either going to be in a bathroom or a kitchen. You feel the bottom grate of a stove, or you feel the bottom drawer. You put your hand in something and it gets wet, you're probably in a toilet. If you're down low enough, high enough, you're in a sink. So these are some things, too, to reorient yourself in a house, is start to look at those types of things. And not to get too far off topic, but the same thing, trying to find ourselves again. If it's a tile floor, looking for the grout seams. If we get disoriented, unless it's a mosaic, which is going to screw you up really bad, those grout seams, even if it's laid on a 45-degree angle, is going to lead you to a wall or a column in a commercial structure if you're talking about pour seams in concrete. Same with baseboards. We normally put the fancy woodwork where our house guests come in and can look at it. What about utility areas of the house? We either have that rubberized or plastic baseboard, or we have that very construction grade squared off. So, I feel the nice scalloped edge of a baseboard, I'm probably in a living area of the house, versus if I feel a squared off edge or no baseboard whatsoever, I'm probably in a utility area of the house. So there's just tactically, there's some things, not only from just the direct access and fighting a kitchen fire, is if things go, from bad to worse, or things don't go as planned, there's some things that you can start to orient yourself around, where things may be in that structure. So that's just a couple little nuggets I could think of from some of the experiences that we've had.
Good. Thanks, Trevor. I think I want to cover a little bit about engine company things for kitchen fires, and then I want to turn it over to Rob and have him a little bit talk about first arriving chief officers and kind of their perspective of the value of 360s and the things that the chief officers are looking for when they show up. One of the things that I think we do a disservice to firefighters across the country is we put them in burn buildings and have a very, very separated or sterile environments as far as not working together per se. So, we all know that, the guys that go to a lot of burn building fires, they tend to stop as soon as the body of the fire is knocked down. When they're done with their deal, they tend to pull the hose lines out. That's just typically what we do in burn buildings. So I think it behooves us to talk about, when the engine company goes in, it's usually a fairly easy stretch. The kitchen is usually not very far from the front door. If your front door is your access, oftentimes the kitchen has a door that gets you right to it from the outside of the structure for a utility door or whatever. But I think one of the things that engine companies do on real working fires that's a mistake is, we don't have as much staffing as some of the larger urban departments do. And so a lot of times we don't have things happening concurrently, which would be really great. And that's really how it should happen. But we don't have a search happening while there's a fire attack happening, while there's a search on the second floor happening. While the vent hole's being cut in the roof kind of stuff. It's just not normally how we operate. We usually have an engine company gets there, works for a period of time. It could be a minute, could be 5 minutes, depending on where they are in my area. And then you have a truck company come in and they're doing a primary search and things like that. So the problem is that we tend to, if we shut that line down and pull that line out, what does it cover? Well, if it's a 2-story house, it's almost always the kitchen's going to be on your first floor. And our search and rescue priority is going to be on the second floor where the bedrooms are. That's typically in a residential setting. We want to do that. So the engine company, the firefighting is actually not that hard to do in a kitchen fire. It's got wide access. It knocks down fairly well. But the problem is we need to leave somebody with that line to keep that fire from getting to those stairs. We really need to do. A gazillion trillion years ago, when I was in the Navy as a firefighter, we were required to set what was called a fire watch. So if you put out or extinguish a fire on a ship, you did not leave. You set a watch up for that particular area and never left until the whole thing was finished up. So all I'm saying is when you get in there, they're not really tough fires to stretch to. There might be a lot of fire to knock down to get there. But once you get there, keep that off of the interior stairs, unless you like those YouTube moments where people are trying to pull victims out of the windows and drop them off the ladders and stuff like that. Those interior stairs are usually the easiest way and the quickest way to get people out. So from an engine company operations perspective, it's not usually a big stretch. It's not a hard stretch. It could be a fight to get there, but then hold that fire where it is. You want to look for extension and things like that, but make sure you protect those stairs and protect those search crews that are coming in. Or even if you have to split your crew where you have, oftentimes we don't have a truck crew there, and the engine company has to actually start doing some primary search in the areas right around the fire area. Leave somebody there to watch that fire. Don't let that thing go unknown. So that's kind of my engine company perspective. Rob, you want to talk a little bit about what first due officers kind of looking for when you're looking at residential structure fires and when they involved in the kitchen?
Yeah. So just to kind of piggyback on what Bobby's saying, typically in Salisbury, we don't have chief's aides. Some of the larger departments may. So I'm kind of one-man show when I arrive in the command vehicle, kind of doing my own thing. Obviously, 360s are important. 360s are 360s for a reason. All 4 sides, not just A, B, and D. You don't just glance down the right, glance down the left, and then go back to the buggy. because typically, like we said, kitchens are in the rear. If you don't go get a look at that rear, you're not going to find out. You're not going to find utilities, locations, things like that. I try to point those things out once my 360 is complete. 360 is complete. I've got a single story rancher, no basement. Utilities appear to be on the seaside, beast wherever they may be. And then what you've got a little bit further than just your initial arriving. I think that tends to trigger the second and third and fourth arriving units rather than them coming in kind of blind, just kind of listening to the operations. Window locations and sizes. We've not really talked about that, but if you think about it, most of the time, what's above your kitchen sink in most houses is going to be a smaller window. If it's not the kitchen, it's going to be probably the bathroom. So kind of eyeing those things up. Most of our rancher style houses in Salisbury have obviously a front door, sometimes a slider off the rear, and then on the B side, D side, they'll have a door going out to a small little deck set of steps. Typically, that door is off of a utility room or the kitchen. And it may be your best and easiest access, like Trevor said, rather than having to fight your way through the side A door, go to the D side door, come in. You might go through a small little, 6x6 utility room, and then boom, you're right in the kitchen. You're not fighting all that hoarding or whatever else, couches, sofas, things like that. We talked the other night, and I was mentioning a fire on another shift that they had. It came in, I believe it just came in as an automatic alarm. And then I'm not sure if it got upgraded while they were going or not, but first arriving engine comes up, they do their thing. They see, smoke at the front door, stretch a line, engine crew does what they're supposed to do. Truck now was doing the call automatically. So they're coming and they started doing their search. Unbeknownst to them, nobody was ported trapped. I don't think there was a car in the driveway. All the signs of where we just kind of would have laid back, sat on our haunches and just kind of gone with it. And they located a unconscious female victim in one of the back bedrooms. The engine company did their thing, like Bobby said, held the fire in check, extinguished it, made sure it was out. And the members of the truck crew pulled that lady to safety, and she made a full recovery. So it's imperative that when you're doing the training back at the firehouse, if you're staffing engines and trucks, or if you're in a volley house that just runs an engine, play these situations out in like almost like a tabletop. What are we going to do in this situation if we're the engine company or if we're the truck company? That's more of the company officer. Started out with the chief officer standpoint of things, but basically that's what we're looking at. And then just to kind of go back on what Trevor was saying, I mean, nobody wants to do the non-sexy stuff, and we got it this fancy name, community risk reduction, but we've really been doing that forever. If you think back, change of smoke detector batteries, neighborhood sweeps, and such. I was talking to a past chief in Salisbury, and we used to have a home fire inspection program where we actually had a home inspector, and that was his job. He would go out every day and do home inspections. And we used to, at the time, I think before it started, he told me we were averaging 5 to 7 deaths a year, fire deaths. And this was 10 or 20, this is probably 20 years ago. And we went on a 6-year stretch while we were doing the home inspections with 0 fire deaths. So that's pretty significant. Again, we called it home inspection. We didn't call it community risk reduction. And, all this stuff that like Trevor said, some of these, the younger guys, they don't want to do that nowadays. They just want to go to the fires and run the calls, and that stuff's all good and well, and those will still come. But I think as they advance through the fire service, they'll realize the importance of doing some community risk reduction, whether it's, simply changing out a chirping smoke detector that you heard on or a battery on an EMS call, or so on and so forth. But to kind of take it a little bit of a step further with regards to the strategy and tactics, and I know we're kind of talking a lot about residential, but the commercial fires, kitchen fires, the quantity of the flammable product is something that I think people need to remember. When you're talking about a residence, you're typically talking about what? A small residential frying pan. Go to a McDonald's, go to Burger King, whatever your fast food restaurant of choice, Popeyes, whatever it may be, and you have vats of grease that is hot all day long. I can just, forcing your way through a restaurant or coming in the back door and having a fryer that's, burning on top and hitting that with your hose line, it's a recipe for disaster. So you've got to be thinking about what kind of building we're going to. I think back to a fire we had at the Popeyes on 13 down south. There was mostly contained to the fryer. The hood system kind of darkened it down, but it was definitely a fire. And if those guys had went in with a hose line, we would have had a heck of a mess on our hands with rapid fire spread, because I think Bobby hit on it earlier, might have been Trevor. These places, while the hoods may be cleaned regularly, are the walls scrubbed down, and that's commercial and residential. This stuff builds up and cakes up on the undersides of cabinets, and they almost become, laden with chemicals and substances that are just going to fuel that fire even more. And, like Trevor kind of hit on, it's kitchens are usually on wide open spaces. I mean, I'm sitting here looking at my room or my house, and kitchen's in the background, and there's a 2-story great room right in front of me. So that leads right to where my bedroom, all the bedrooms in my house are. So it's definitely wide open and large area for smoke to collect before any bypass or outside of my house is ever going to see it.
And Rob, if you don't mind, and I know you've probably been on this call 100 times, if not more, but when we're talking about residential kitchen fires, the probability of having not only multiple fires from someone almost like when they have a mattress fire and trying to shove it out the window. If there's a pan on the stove, they try to take it through the house until it gets too hot and they drop it. A lot of us, we have our paramedic units that respond directly with us to the fire scene. And more often than not, the first arriving paramedic unit, most, if not all of that crew goes to suppression, and it's a secondary unit that might be coming in. It takes care of the EMS factor. And in your experience with having not only those multiple fires, but also the potential of having at least one burn victim possibly out of this, what are some things that you do to handle that situation? And then I want to pitch it to Bobby after that, because I know in his first due up there in Delaware, I believe you guys have some walkout basements in a lot of the places where they've converted them into a separate living quarters. So maybe you guys can talk separately on those things. But if you don't mind touching on that, Rob, as far as how to split your crews up and taking care of multiple functions at one time. So you have the fire function, but you also have an obvious burn victim or two on arrival.
Yeah, sure. So in Salisbury, on our first alarm assignments, we're getting 2 medic units. Our policy actually says that the first medic unit is responsible for patient care. But a lot of times, Trevor's right. We pull up. There's not a person standing in the front yard. We put them to work to assist our suppression with our staffing of 3 on the engines and 4 on the truck. That's 2 extra people, and typically. Very good, a good. We pair a firefighter EMT and a firefighter paramedic, and typically that's just some stellar people on those crews. So definitely, I had a chief officer when I was coming up that we could literally make eye contact when we would pull up. There's no patients. He would look at me. He'd kind of give me the nod, and I knew that my partner and myself we were going to work. And then that second arriving EMS unit would assume patient care. And as a chief officer, I go back and forth because we staff 3 EMS units that, I sometimes think that we could use 3, 1 to help with suppression, 1 for patients, and then 1 for our own people to be there, and we go back and forth in our command meetings about should we do 2, should we do 3, because of when we do 3, we deplete the city of resources for the other emergencies. So it is critical that we have those EMS units respond on the calls, and they do definitely assist us with that. I mean, I'm not sure what other departments do, but we carry, our guys have air packs. They got their gear, guys and gals, I should say, air packs and gear and stuff like that right on the rig, and they come off and they know that they're going to work. There's nothing also that says that they can't help with outside vent utilities without being truly engaged inside of the the structure above and beyond, should you then get presented with a burn victim later on, 2-3 minutes into the call. So yeah, it's imperative that we have those medic units going with us, and it's their mission is kind of twofold. And I think I wouldn't hesitate to say that they're more important than they probably give themselves credit for when they're going to a call. A lot of them are kind of disappointed because they're on the ambulance and they're not on the nozzle, and but we can put them to work. And a lot of times, I know from back in the days when I was riding the ambulance as an ALS provider, I caught quite a bit of fire and got put to work quite a few times from an ambulance. And so, yeah, Trevor's right. It's imperative that they be well trained and be ready to go to work and kind of have their eyes open as to, do I have a burn patient or am I going to actual suppression? And then that next unit coming up and saying, all right, well, we didn't have a burn patient, now we do, and I've got this, under control.
Good deal. And Bobby, if I'm talking out of school, let me know. But I believe that in some of your townhouses, some of them are built where they have a sub-level or a walkout basement. Am I thinking about the right place? So I thought Dougie had talked about them. But so when we talk about going around to the rear of the structure for the kitchen, that might not necessarily be at that grade level that you're going into, because it might be a walkout basement. Is there anything you can add on that, Bobby, from up there in Millville?
Yeah, we have a few of those. We're pretty much flatland, so we have had fires in those up here in Delaware. Much more prominent in the northern part of the state. We had some firefighter fatalities a few years ago in Wilmington from exactly a situation like that with a walkout row home fire. So, I think where the kitchen is the big deal. I think if you have a walkout basement, I don't even know if it's a walkout basement. We call it a basement because from the front we don't see it and it's below grade, but from the rear it doesn't look like a basement at all. And I think we kind of throw some terminology to it, but really, and looking at what Rob's talking about, where is the basement? That's really the important thing. And when Rob does his 360, he goes, you know what? It's a walkout basement in the back. And that's kind of why the 360 is so important. You could have a 3-story or 4-story building in the back and a 2-story building in the front, and have no idea without that 360. Most of your larger buildings, you're going to know about it, but there's residentials that do the same thing. So, yeah, I think I just think it's really where the location of the kitchen is kind of what the big deal is to me. We have very few here, but we've had a couple fires in them. So there you go.
Good deal. Thanks, Bobby. Appreciate that.
Well, guys, we're just over an hour. I don't know if we want to kick it around one more time just to wrap it up, and then we'll close it out for the night. Great conversation as always. So, Trevor, why don't we go over to you for your final thoughts for kitchen fires and everything that we've discussed for tonight.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Really, we pretty much covered a lot of things. I'm really glad that Rob got into the commercial kitchen fires as well, because that's a complete conversation on its own. But there's just so many dynamics to the commercial buildings, especially the fast food restaurants, like he had mentioned, and and also our risk benefit with that, because as we talked about before, a lot of the fast food restaurants, other than liability insurance, they don't insure the structure itself. If there's a fire in it, it gets torn down and it gets rebuilt. And all the heavy equipment, the chilling units, the HVAC, everything that's on the roof. So when we're dealing with fires in the hood systems or some of those commercial ones, that's its own animal, which has its own subset of hazards. So I'm really glad that Chief Frampton brought that up. And I want to thank not only all the viewers for looking at this tonight and everybody on the panel, but Rob, you especially. You brought something to light that we kind of overlooked. Like you said, it's a very small percentage of our calls overall, but accounts for such a major part of our property damage and dollar loss. And I know you're doing this as part of your applied research as a student in the Executive Fire Officer program. So congratulations to you on that. And, keep on keeping on. You're doing a great job with it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Definitely was inspired as a young newbie by the likes of Trevor and Bobby and several others down in Ocean City and in Salisbury. So I'm giving you guys some props for kind of pushing me along the way, along with several others. But I thought tonight when Trevor and Ben asked me to be a part of this, I was kind of like, well, it's going to be kind of boring and dry. Nobody wants to talk about the research and the numbers and all that kind of stuff. But then we got to talking and trying to tie it together with the strategy and tactics. And look, I'm as much of a nozzle geek as anybody else, but what I have learned is there's definitely some numbers and some research, and we do play a critical role in community risk reduction. And I know people don't want to refer to it as that and talk to it as that, but that is our primary responsibility. The fires aren't going to go away. They may be less, but they're going to be more. They're going to burn hotter. They're going to burn faster. And the dollar loss is simply there to prove that we really need to address this. A lot of the research that I did and the conclusions that I came up with went back to legislation and prevention type programs, such as, fire extinguishers in rental homes and fire stop AES systems in multifamily dwellings, and would love to have them in rental homes, but realize that there's a cost and a maintenance, not necessarily a maintenance, but a inspection type issue that not all municipalities can have. So those were kind of the drivers for it. We're fortunate in Salisbury to have a fire marshal's office that's now working for us. They're doing great stuff. They're doing plan reviews and all kinds of commercial stuff, and they definitely have their interest sparked and are piqued in looking into expanding into residential stuff. So again, I just thank you guys for the invite. I hope people got some stuff out of this, and hope we didn't bore you to death with stats. I think we talked definitely a little bit too about the stats and tactics and things like that. So thank you guys. I appreciate it. Look forward to coming back again and talk about something else.
Perfect. That's what we want to hear. All right, Bobby, you're up next.
Well, first and foremost, thank you, Chief Frampton, for coming along on this ride with us. I met Chief Frampton long enough ago that I had color in my hair and he had hair. So, it's been a really an interesting topic to talk about. And I've never been, I've always been kind of more of the interior kind of fire guy, training guy, and things like that. But recently, the fire chief asked me to head up a smoke detector program in a community in Ocean City. And I remember when we first started going through it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really boring, and we got to get ladders and smoke detectors and all that crazy stuff. And I got to tell you, over 80% of the buildings, or the houses, residential structures that we saw didn't have what would meet the standard. They were older than 10 years old. They didn't work. And, when we talk about socioeconomic, unfortunately, fire detection systems, they tended to be universal. We had a guy who was a prominent lawyer that none of his smoke detectors were working at all. We checked his house. He had plenty of money, had plenty of resources, just never thought about it. Wasn't on his mind. So, the fire research and the community risk reduction, as so eloquently as Chief Trevor put it, it's important because the lives it saves don't make the news. They just don't make the news. You just hear a reduction in deaths nationwide. You don't know why. And I can tell you a lot of it has to do with the hardworking fire marshals and the hardworking people that are doing this other research and things like that us fire guys just didn't want to do. So I appreciate what you're doing, Rob. I thank you for that. It's certainly going to help us do our job better. And thanks to everyone else for watching. And it's been a good time tonight. Thanks.
Thanks, Bobby. Thanks, guys. Rob, always a pleasure to talk to you. One of the shifts that I always enjoy to come in and hang out and just like talk shop and do kind of like what we did tonight. So it's always a blast to come in and see you guys when you're working. As far as, everything we talked about tonight, like the guy said, the community risk reduction, it's not the sexy part. It's not what, everybody necessarily signed up to do. We signed up to ride Big Red. We signed up to run calls, to stretch lines, to put fire out. But it is, I would say, equally, if not more important, than doing all that, is making sure that we're getting out in the community. We're explaining what we're doing. We're helping prevent stuff from occurring, because ultimately it's not about us. If you join the fire service, you're in it for the right reasons. It's not about us, and it's about the people we serve. So going out, doing that stuff, doing the right thing, and helping prevent, those incidents from happening. So that's it for what we have tonight. We're looking forward to next week, or not next week. Sorry. I believe we're looking at May 28th. Sorry, 2 weeks. Yep. Sorry, guys. Again, we've only done this 5 times. I'll get it straight sometime. So in preparation for coming up in 2 weeks, in order to keep up with us, again, a special thanks to Assistant Chief Rob Frampton, A Shift, Salisbury Fire Department. If you guys aren't watching the Salisbury Fire Department Facebook page, you should be. A lot of great stuff that they're coming out with there. Chief Frampton was a big part in this recent thing that we've started, where we read every Thursday at 10:30 on Facebook Live. And again, a lot of stuff coming through with that. So, like I said, Salisbury Fire Department, follow them on their social media. I'm sorry I didn't put it up here, but here's everything for Strike the Box, our Facebook page, our new Instagram page. We're a little slow with the start. We're new with it, so cut us a little slack. But there's our Instagram, Twitter, our website, and as always, our email. So if you guys have questions, you want to get up with us about something, please shoot us an email, shoot us a message, send us a tweet, whatever it is. But let us know, get up with us. We'd love to come out and chat with you, talk with you, and help you guys with whatever you got going on. Moving forward, like I said, next week, we're coming back. Thirsty Thursday, number 6, Millennial Madness. Chief Steedman had the great idea of doing a talk about the millennials and how they interact and how we interact. Unfortunately, I have to say I'm a millennial, but how we interact with the previous generations, how we're interacting and moving forward with the younger generations. So we have some special guests. We're still in the process of setting them all up, getting them straight with what we're going to do. But watch our Facebook, watch our social media. It's going to be epic. That's all I'm going to say. It's going to be awesome. You're not going to want to miss it. Chief Steedman called me and told me who one of our special guests was, and I had my own little freak out period. So definitely watch our stuff. See when we're going to be when we'll be announcing this, and be sure to check us out. Until next time, stay safe. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Take care of your brothers and sisters, and we will see you soon. Have a good night.